This is WRFM on 98.2. A little something for the weekend.
You're listening to The Crypt on WRFM, and joining me on the show today is one of the co-writers and producer of the new up-and-coming documentary Leviathan, the story of Hellraiser and Hellbound, Hellraiser II, Gary Smart. So thanks so much for joining me today on the show, Gary.
No problem. Brilliant. Thank you.
Well, before we talk about the documentary, could you tell me a bit about yourself?
Well, I've always been a horror fan since a very young age. I remember when I was probably in primary school, lending out videos of Nightmare on Elm Street and Hellraiser. Always been brought up on horror films for some reason. Never affected me in any negative way, hopefully. Not a serial killer or anything, but I've always loved horror films. And one of my favourite films, apart from Hellraiser, was a film called The Return of the Living Dead. And I've loved that film since a very young age. And when about 5 years ago, I met somebody at a show in Birmingham who was working on a horror magazine in the UK, and he obviously loved the film as well, and we kind of put our heads together and said, let's try and write a book or something for Return of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
At the same time, I became friends with the actor Don Cowper, who stars in that film.
Yeah.
And that's basically just through MySpace and Facebook. I arranged for him to do a show over in the UK, the NEC in Birmingham. We became friends. We listened to his fantastic stories and kind of thought, kind of cemented our idea that these stories need to be shared, and obviously a book was a good idea at the time. So we went about writing this book called The Complete History of the Return of the Living Dead. We got that published in 2010. After that, we were approached to do a documentary on Return of the Living Dead called More Brains, and we were asked to write that, do some graphics for that as well. So that was released in 2011. And then last year, I met up with Kevin McDonough, who's our director, also Nick Helmsley, who's our co-writer and producer, and we came to the concept of cult screenings, where we show cult kind of films in Birmingham at a really nice theatre called Custard Factory, and we get special guests.
Yeah.
And our first film was Return of the Living Dead. We had Don Cowper over. And our second film to show was Hellraiser 1 and 2. We managed to get some of the cast over, Kenneth, CRANHAM, Jeff Portus, Simon Bamford, Nicholas Vince. And again, based on their Q&A and how great that was, we kind of thought, no one's ever done a documentary on Hellraiser yet, and a kind of retrospect, in-depth documentary. Let's try and do one. And it kind of started from there.
But that's fine. Well, that's the power now of Facebook and
without
MySpace.
Facebook, that with regards to writing the book itself for Return of the Living Dead, Facebook was so important because obviously getting hold of people, and looking up, it seems a lot of the cult horror stars seem to be on Facebook. That you don't have to go through agents; you go straight to them, and most of the sites are run by them, personally. So, and that's same with the Hellraiser screening. That a lot of the people we contacted recently to interview are either on Facebook or have kind of some kind of Facebook, social media kind of outlet like Twitter and whatnot. So it's been brilliant for us.
Well, when we would have been younger, you could never even dream of making contact with people like that, and now it is so easy. It's fantastic.
I remember being 10 or 11 years old and desperately trying to get hold of some of the cast and crew of my favourite films and writing letters to America and getting them sent back, return address and whatnot. And now with Facebook and Twitter, it's just amazing. You can get hold of these cult stars and these actors you could never have dreamt of, as you said before, when we were kids. So it's amazing, really.
Well, Hellraiser, that is 25 years old now. Why do you think, because it's still just as popular today as it would have been when it first came out, what do you think it is about that movie that's made it stand the test of time?
I think there's probably two things, really. I think obviously Pinhead, a big reason why the film's popular. It's such an iconic kind of image. You obviously you've got your Freddy Kruegers and your Jason Voorhees and your Michael Myers, but Pinhead seems completely kind of different kind of character. And also Pinhead was kind of very kind of elegant. He's like kind of a Dracula kind of character, wasn't he? Really, quite elegant kind of villain.
Yeah, that's it. And you know what's so amazing as well is the fact that he had such a small part. Do you know Frank was really the big bad in Hellraiser, and he was for the tiny piece he had in that movie. Do you know?
Oh, it's become so iconic. It's about 7 minutes, I think, 8 minutes, probably in it for. And to be honest, what we've done with documentary to a degree is that we obviously understand how important Pinhead is, and you can't do a documentary on Hellraiser without obviously focusing on Pinhead and obviously the mythology there. But actually, if you read The Hellbound Heart, which is what Hellraiser was based on, and you actually watch the first film, as you said just then, Frank and Julia are really the core of that story. And Frank and Julia, that love story really, it is like a tragic kind of Shakespearean love story, those two characters. And that's what we're looking at as well in a documentary. That, you know, it's about that kind of journey of those two characters. And originally, Julia was supposed to be the main villain, and she was supposed to carry on from number 2 and number 3 as well.
Yeah.
So obviously Pinhead's important to us, but we're also really focusing for the first time really ever on Frank and Julia as well.
Well, if you look now, Nightmare on Elm Street, there was a documentary out about that called Never Sleep Again. 4 hours long that documentary was, and it was amazing, and it really delved into the Elm Street saga. So what would you say fans of Hellraiser can expect now in the documentary? Well,
our documentary will roughly run about 3.5 hours.
Brilliant.
And that is focusing just on Hellraiser 1 and 2. We are doing a featurette, which I'll explain about parts 3 to 9. But what fans can expect really is, as you said, you know, we would like with Never Sleep Again, a very in-depth analysis of the film, looking at other areas of the film that no one's really looked at before. For example, as I said, Frank and Julie's relationship. You know, the emergence of characters like Dr. Chenard as well, who actually is quite an iconic kind of character as well. Also, we have some actors who really never been interviewed at all, and crew actually, about Hellraiser. And what we're looking at is that anybody who's really involved in that film, Hellraiser 1 and 2, are really just important as each other. So, you know, if you on the set that day and you did a bit of makeup or you served the tea, you would have seen things on that set which other people may not have ever seen. So we're trying to get hold of people to get a wealth of kind of stories. I mean, for instance, we've interviewed Oliver Parker, who was playing the Removal Man parts 1 and 2. Now, Oliver has never been interviewed at all about Hellraiser, but he's actually now a director in his own right. He's directed Centurions, Johnny English, but he was also part of Clive Barker's Dog Company, which was originally the first kind of thing that Clive did. So somebody as important as that, never been ever interviewed about Hellraiser, and he was there. He was there at the birth of Hellraiser, and obviously the aftermath. So he gave some fantastic stories. So really, what fans can expect is something which really goes very in depth, and some stories I've never really heard before, and as I said, delving into some parts of the film which no one really has. Again, going back to the love story kind of thing, the tragic kind of love story of Hellraiser.
But that's it as well, because I'm a massive Nightmare on Elm Street fan, and I thought I knew so much about it until I watched Never Sleep Again, and I realised I didn't really know that much. Do you know what I mean? Because the detail it does go into. That's why I think this is a fantastic idea to do this for Hellraiser. Now, you're concentrating on the first 2 installments. Is there a particular reason you made that decision?
Well, I think the first 2, the group thing, the first 2 films really are one film. I mean, the second film is set literally minutes after the first film. They've got the same. I mean, the first film is probably described as a haunted house kind of movie, and the second film is described as a lunatic asylum movie. And the kind of, you know, the first one's very dark and very, you know, tight sets, minimal characters. The second one becomes like, you know, another world, completely going into hell. But they are one story. It's about the same characters. It's about the journey of Kirsty from the kind of weak kind of daughter, you know, innocent, to this kind of heroine at the end, and also the story of Julia and Frank, and actually the story of Julia, really, how she goes from the wicked stepmother to the Queen of Hell, and it's really weak, you know. But after Hellraiser 2, the film went in a different direction completely, and that's because of various factors, really. One, popularity of Pinhead, and the focus was then taken away from Julia and onto Pinhead himself.
Yeah.
So the production moved to the States as well. So obviously, inevitably when things move abroad, especially in America, you know, things get cranked up a little bit more money's thrown in, the effects change and whatnot, and it becomes a bit more commercialised, really. So for us, Hellraiser 1 and 2 are those iconic British kind of films made by, you know, British crew. And so that's why we focus on them, really.
Well, it's the same thing. You take Wes Craven out of Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know, it's the ones that he was connected to are the best ones.
You know, it's same as Hellraiser. 9 Hellraiser films. I mean, they do get worse. The problem with that is basically that the Hellraiser films themselves, the scripts, weren't Hellraiser scripts after part 5. That's part 4, sorry. 5, 6, 7, 8, and 7 and 8, sorry, were basically scripts of other films which the company purchased and then threw Pinhead in for 5 minutes. So, and you probably can see that as well. The mythology of the Hellraiser saga disappears completely, and they're still okay films in their own rights, like the Nightmare on Elm Street films. But when you think about Hellraiser, a lot of people think of 1 and 2.
And I think it's the darkest of all the 80s cult horrors. I think it's the darkest horror of them all. When you think of that for its time.
Oh yeah.
I remember I was only 7 when that came out, and it freaked me out. Really did. Didn't stop me watching it, but it freaked me out.
Sounds me. I mean, I've got very vivid, memories of Pinhead when I was younger. I remember going every time I see Pinhead. I still get flashbacks of old video stores. Yeah. And I've seen the cutout in the video store. And I think it's a very 80s film as well, in the sense that, obviously, the dress and whatnot. But I kind of always think back of that time. You know, you take yourself backwards, don't you, in time sometimes with certain kind of films and whatnot. It, yeah. As you said, the Hellraiser itself, it's in its own time, and it's such a gory kind of... And it really, really broke all the boundaries back then. Again, with the villain himself talking and being elegant. And don't forget, the Cenobites themselves aren't actually the bad guys, because the people, they only kill people who open the box. And actually, they're not killing people, they're basically making them experience pleasure and pain, and they're trapped in hell. But those people have gone about opening that box for a reason. That's why, number 2, when Tiffany, the mute girl, opens it, she's not taken by the Cenobites, because she's opened it innocently, because Dottie Chenard's made her do it. So actually, the kind of the anti-heroes the Cenobites are, they only really get people who deserve to be got, really, which is kind of strange concept.
Well, like Frank.
Exactly like Frank. And also, you've got to remember that a lot of films from the 80s, there were, your Freddy's and that, hunting down young teenagers, partygoers. This film was about a family. Larry and Kirsty and Julia, for all her fault, for a family. It's not about kids. And that was completely different for the 80s as well, because I said slasher films were really about, big boobs running down, getting attacked, virgins, if you have sex, you get murdered. That didn't happen in that film. It was very much dark and about obsession as well. So, it's lucky actually it did so well back then, considering it changed the kind of, and the normal kind of genre of horror films, really.
And then, of course, the special effects, like CGI wasn't painted all over every film back in the 80s. The special effects were fantastic, and especially at the start. The reanimation of Frank.
It's fantastic, that. Yeah. I mean, but, you look at... Even when you look at some of the effects in part 2, I like effects like that. I like practical effects, and some of them have aged, some of them haven't. Some of them are still really good. Like you said, the resurrection of Frank, the birth of Frank is still really good. And it becomes more real as well. You can tell when something's CGI, despite how much millions of pounds they throw into it now, you can still tell it's CGI. Whereas that practical effect, and naturally, something like Frank's birth, all it is a bag on the floor for his heart, pumping back and forwards, and it's a clay wax model being melted, but it looks fantastic on screen.
Oh, really does. Well, if you look now, you watch The Evil Dead.
Oh, yeah.
That just looks like mushy peas coming out of stuff.
Yeah.
Do you know, it doesn't look realistic at all. And then when you look at Hellraiser, you wouldn't go, oh, look, that's crap 80s effects. You still say it's excellent today.
We've been extremely lucky to meet, obviously, some of the effects guys and hear their stories, and the company that made the effects for Hellraiser 1 and 2 were a company called Image Animation, which aren't around, unfortunately, anymore, because of the usual politics of filmmaking. But you look at what they did in the 80s, they were top-notch, they really were. They British companies based at Pinewood, the effects they did on such a low budget as well, you can't fault it, and they were kids themselves. These people were 17, 18, 19 at the time. And for what they achieved for that film, when you said, you watch it now, you don't look at it and go, oh, that's rubbish. The birth of Frank is still really good. And it's still quite scary, actually. Whereas some films you said you watch now, and you can tell straight away how they've done it and the corny effects and whatnot. So it's kind of lasted the test of time, really.
The prospect of speaking to Clive Barker and delving into the mind of someone who creates the darker side of horror, that must be so exciting.
It is, yeah. We're working on Clive at the moment. As I said, most people you talk to through the films are very easy to get hold of, and Clive unfortunately isn't. But we are talking to his people at the moment, and obviously we're going out to the States in February. So that's going to be exciting in itself, going out there to interview people. But you're right, I mean, when we get to meet him and have that conversation and listen to obviously his views on the mythology and where the inspiration has come from the story, it's going to be brilliant, because everybody else has been so complimentary about Clive, everybody we've interviewed. And, and despite the fact that his stories are very kind of strange and sadistic, he's a very nice guy.
So what stage of production are you at this moment?
We've got about, I'd say about 12 interviews in the can so far. We've got another 3 scheduled for next weekend, then another 3 after that, another 2 after that, another 2 after that.
Oh God, busy.
It's been a busy weekend. Then we've got the States, where we've got some, obviously we're booking at the moment, and then we come back to the UK and we've got some more scheduled. I think in total we'll have probably about 27 interviews. So you imagine that each interview lasts about 2 hours as well.
Yeah, so
it's going to be a very, very hard editing process, I think. But the DVD or Blu-ray will have a lot of featurettes as well and extras, delve into kind of focusing more on particular kind of things as well. For instance, as I said, we're looking at parts 3 to 9 in its own mini kind of featurette, maybe about 20 minutes. The writer of the book, Hellraiser Legacy, Paul Kane, is going to do a kind of twosome with me, where we're going to talk about parts 3 to 9, about how the films have progressed and the rise and fall of Hellraiser. So we're going to cover those as well.
So if listeners want to keep up to date with the project, they can follow the guys on Leviathan, the story of Hellraiser and Hellbound, Hellraiser 2 on Facebook. You've quite a lot of followers already.
Yes, we have. Yeah, it's building quite some momentum at the moment, which is good for us.
It's great.
Get the word out.
Well, that's it. The more people know about it, the better.
Oh, yeah.
Well, listen, Gary, I will let you go, and I wish you the best of luck with documentary, and keep me posted.
I will do, yes.
Because I'm definitely looking forward to seeing this. It sounds fantastic.
Thank you. It was a really pleasure talking to you as well.
Thanks a million.
This is WRFM on 98.2. A little something for the weekend.